Hello and welcome. You're tuned into the best in paranormal talk radio. This is Darkness Radio. I'm your host, Dave Schrader. Along with me, Tim Dennis, my co-host, producer, and good friend, Tim. Tim, I'm going to keep addressing this on a couple of episodes, guest episodes and news episodes, because I've read some of the comments from listeners.
Okay.
They're missing Theater of the Mind. They want to know, when are we going to return? Many of the listeners think that we're pulling Theater of the Mind away from them because it's a punishment of some sorts, or perhaps we've just become too lazy. And we've mentioned it on the show in the past. I'm just going to throw it out there again. Mm-hmm. Theater of the Mind comes from you people. It is your encounters with the paranormal. So if you don't send me a narrative written story, we don't have a story to record. Many of you will send in stories that are not really one story. They're, thanks for the show. Love you guys. This makes me laugh. We're snallygaster. I saw a ghost when I was 12 years old. My mom saw it too. By the way, blah, 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 blah. So you can't really make a full Theater of the Mind from that. And we have made short ones. I think our shortest one has been about 3 minutes long, right, Tim?
Yeah, about 3 minutes.
And our longest is somewhere in the neighborhood of about 18 minutes long. So if you've got a story that you can write out in a narrative way, and what I mean by narrative is, as I walked along the path, the sound of the leaves snapping beneath my feet, so you're painting a beautiful picture for it. I don't even mean beautiful, but I mean you're painting a full picture for us of your story. We'll read them. We'll start doing Theater of the Mind again. We'd love to do them. It just, first of all, was very time consuming with doing the radio show. I was doing 3 radio shows plus filming the Holzer files. And Tim was doing all the work behind the scenes to ready us for this changeover here to Stitcher Premium and Stitcher. So there was so much work behind that we did put it off a little bit. But then, like I said, narrative stories really kind of dried up. Nobody was sending in fleshed out stories. We love short emails. We love little paragraphs that tell us a story. But again, you see our situation. We can only create a Theater of the Mind about your stories when the story is long enough to create a Theater of the Mind around. So again, you can send me your story free of charge. I'm not going to charge these people to send me their stories, Tim. I'm a giver like that.
Oh, that's nice.
They can send their story to me at dave@darknessradio.com. Here's all I ask. Break it up into some paragraphs so it's easier for me to read. And feel free to use spell check and punctuation. If you can do that, we can get along great, and we will continue to give you Theater of the Mind. And as soon as we bank up 3 or 4 stories that I can start recording and Tim can start working on, we will do that and bring you Theater of the Mind. I'd love to do it. Tim likes doing it. It's time consuming, but we're proud of those moments. We did them, I think, for over 2 years. But literally, the well-written stories, and I'm not saying that your emails aren't well-written, but there are some that are written as a full story. There are some that are just written as a thought, or, I had to deal with sleep paralysis as a kid, and this happened and that happened. And it's more matter of fact or like a diary entry as opposed to a story. And I'm not asking you to fake or create a story, just write it as a narrative so that we can share it. And that's all I ask. But Dave, I haven't really had an experience, but my dad who passed away did, and he used to tell us a story. That's great. Tell us the story. Write it as a narrative. We'll share your dad's story on here. But Dave, my dad is still alive, but my great aunt Zelda passed away, and she told me this. We'll tell her story. You get the idea. Now I've laid it out as clear as I possibly can for you a few times. Hopefully you guys will take it upon yourselves to write us your stories. Share your true encounters. Maybe you had a haunted doll. Maybe a strange event occurred with your Ouija board. Maybe you saw an angel and you had a wonderful experience. Maybe you had an experience that wasn't so wonderful with the paranormal. Maybe you had one that was heartwarming, a visit from a loved one. If you've got a story, share it with us. Bigfoot, aliens, UFOs, Ouija boards, psychic phenomena. If you've got a weird story, we want to hear it. We want to share it with our audience. So I'll continue reading your regular emails on the show if you want to keep them short and concise. We'll continue to play your voicemail stories on our Voices from Beyond voicemail segment, 651-300-4977, where you can call in and tell your own story. So that's something to consider, and that's what we can do. But if you want me to read a full-on Theater of the Mind, write it. Share it with us. Dave@darknessradio.com. That's the best way to get going. All right, Tim, I've got a guest joining us right now. And his book is called Deceptive Gods, Confronting the Divine and Demonic. Lorne Therrien, I believe I'm saying that right. Is that right, Lorne? Am I saying the last
You got it right, Dave.
Therrien, nice. Lorne Therrien Sr., our guest today on the program. And Lorne, what a fascinating book. And the fact that you have this kind of deep fascination with the supernatural made me realize you're going to be a perfect guest to join us and talk about some of your experiences. Now, you're a longtime martial arts instructor, right? And you got over 45 years experience?
Yes, Dave. Yeah.
The reason
martial disciplines, yeah.
The reason I ask that, and this may sound strange or new to a lot of our listeners, but Lorne, do you know that I've been approached by many people that are masters of certain martial art disciplines? They claim to have all kinds of paranormal experiences. It's like the more enlightened, the more tuned in they come to themselves, the more they become aware of other energies, of not just your chi, not just your body aura and energy, but of other energies that are maybe not seen. Do you think that it is your work in the field of martial arts that has opened you or keyed you into these experiences?
Well, I certainly think it has definitely helped. There is, meditation is usually a part of the martial arts, and, meditation through the years, training, depending on how you train. I enjoy training in nature. So getting out in nature and training in the elements certainly helped. I would say it's true because, many of the people that I know in various martial art disciplines have always got a story to tell,
I was going to say, did you have experiences with the supernatural growing up, or was it only as you began kind of changing your energy, changing your mindset with meditation and work in the field of martial arts?
Well, my first experience was in 1964, and my family unknowingly leased a house where a horrific murder had taken place. It was actually the most horrific murder in the city at that time. That's where I was first, I would say, introduced. I would say mostly to the shadows, as well as their ability to change form. In other words, to appear to one, as the ghost of the deceased, to appear to another as a horrific creature, and to myself, various forms of little people, and children.
So that was all
well
in this
various
house.
Different shadow sizes. Go ahead.
This was all in that house. Do you believe that
This
it was
all that occurred from that house alone, and then it continued, throughout the years.
Let's start there before we move forward. So when you moved in, how quickly before you and your family realized there was something there?
Well, this is going to be actually the next book that's going to be coming out. It's going to be from my childhood. It took a couple of weeks, and again, this is coming from my mother. It took a couple of weeks before the typical activity started. And I say typical, I mean, doors, opening and closing by themselves, the usual hearing footsteps, strange noises.
Now, would you all see these doors opening and shutting by themselves, or was it you'd be in another room and then you'd hear a door slam upstairs? What was that?
Well, I would say myself and my mother My father was, more skeptical. We would be aware to it more than he would. It wasn't until it started to escalate that he became a believer, which is, usually the case, for most. We knew nothing about, the murder that took place. It was and I'll be brief, but it was a situation where this was the second person that this particular gentleman had killed. He had used a knife in which, she was stabbed multiple times, throughout, all the rooms of the house. There was, as they say, there was blood. But, we had no clue. My parents, had no clue of this, and the neighborhood was very quiet. No one spoke of this. So it took a couple of weeks, as I said before, usually the basics of what we usually hear started. And then my mother was the first one to see, this woman as a ghost.
Was it a frightening experience for her, or just more shocking?
Well, my mother has told me that she has, throughout her life, and I hear this frequently myself, I'm sure you do, that she had visitations from shadows. Now, of course, at this time in my life, I was very young. I certainly did not see a link between the two at that time period, obviously. So my mother would see it, as a ghost. And in the beginning, she didn't know why. I started seeing it, more as a shadow.
Would the ghost seem to acknowledge your mother as well?
Well, I think it was, in my mother's case, it was, more of the looking to more pull on her heartstrings, make a connection. Because my mother felt immediately that this was, the woman trying to, come back from the dead and interact with her, myself as a child, I've seen things differently,
So you didn't perceive this as a female. You just saw a dark, was it a shapeless form, or was it in the shape of a human?
When I would see shadows at that time period, whether they be, of a shorter stature, 2 to 3 feet, or taller, I would see these, these movements, especially, when I was in the room, in my bedroom by myself. I could focus and I would see these movements, And again, I'm certainly not saying at that time period in my life that I could see a link that I found or seen many years later, between the two, the ghosts and the shadows. So, it took about a year, escalating to where, the situation got to a point that, crows got involved.
What do you mean crows got involved?
Crows got involved. We had 6 crows come down the chimney. And this is a true story. And the 6 crows came down the chimney and started flying all around the house. At the same time period, the shadow presence was very strong, in the house. It was very much the feeling of dread. The police were called. The police came.
Wait, why would the police be called? What was happening?
The police were called because of the crows. The police were called because of the crows and the obviously strange and unusual activity. My mother at this time, her neighbors, no one educated her on what had taken place. And
how did the police respond when you call them and you say, "Listen, a murder of crows has just flown into our our chimney"? Are they like, all animal control, not cops?
Well, in 1964, they certainly wouldn't look at it like even now they would probably think it 98 cents short of a buck. But they came in. It frightened the police officers. Just the feeling of being in the house, the crows flying around, which eventually went right back out the chimney. This is the time when, and again, I'm leaving out a lot, but this is the time when they, one of the police officers asked my mother to come to the station. He says, "I have something to show you." And that is when, she learned what took place, in the house. But that 1 year was a lot of activity, a lot of stuff that.
So were the police basically telling your mom, "We think this paranormal activity or the things you're experiencing may be tied to this murder that took place there"?
Well, I think I can't say if that's exactly what, why he did what he did. I think he just wanted to fill her in on what has taken place in that house that, may or may not have something to do with the unusual activity that, that
sure did the
family experienced.
Did the police, did they witness any of the strange phenomenon themselves?
The only thing that they had witnessed was that very suffocating, presence. Okay. This cloud of, what people would say feels like hate, feels like, extreme anger. Nauseating. This is what they felt, because it was, this is the reason, for the book was to investigate, this invisible presence, that humanity has given many labels, but, when we come right down to it, like you asked, it's still an invisible presence until the day comes that, this presence appears on a talk show.
Right.
It's like they put in the book, we only have our own personal experiences, religion, science, etc., to tell us about this, So, to answer the question with the police officer, I don't, they actually showed her the pictures of what occurred there. Probably something they wouldn't do today.
Oh, yeah.
And this really, it's really hit home with my mother, and some other things, had taken place after that. My mother had lost, a child in the house. So, A lot of darkness, I mean,
Right.
a lot of darkness in that home.
Do you believe that the darkness in the home led to that loss of your family member?
My mother believes so. From experience, I would not say it could be possible. We don't know. There's some things, we'll never know.
And I don't mean to push, but just as an understanding, was it a surprise loss, or did this family or this relative or brother, sister of yours, was it at their own hands?
Oh no, it was my mother was pregnant.
Okay, all right.
So yeah.
So she lost the baby before it was even.
Lost the baby. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, it's 6 months. Yeah.
But she believes that the forces put undue stress on her, which may have caused this.
She believes so. Yes. Yeah.
So she believes she was under demonic attack. Does she think that the spirits, and I'm not saying any of this dismissively, I hope you understand that, Lorne.
Oh, sure.
Does she believe that the spirits were physically affecting the baby, or was it the stress on her from dealing with the spirits in the home that caused the loss?
Well, I think what you said when you mentioned stress, in my experience, we all react to stress, in a similar way. These beings create stress. They may be invisible, and, people may not accept that they exist, but they create stress to the body. They create stress to the mind. For me, they're another form of intelligent life. This is what they are. That we have not yet. Not everyone is accepted. So I believe that that there's a possibility that it created intense stress that could have played a part.
Do you believe, and then kind of looking back, being an expert kind of on the spiritual supernatural now, do you believe that the energy in the house was created because of the trauma? Or do you believe that the trauma, the murder that took place there, was because this paranormal facet was affecting that homeowner, that killer?
Well, I believe, Dave, in what's called the tag-along, okay? Or what I call a tag-along, or some people would call it an attachment. I believe let's say that this particular killer had an attachment, and this attachment had a demonic mindset, and a murder takes place in the house. It is possible that this particular tag-along or attachment, remains. And that can be for many reasons. It remains in the house. In my experience, the beings with that type of a mindset, what we would call demonic or a dark mind, they're attracted to blood, and it may have stayed there, because of this attraction. And also the pain involved of those that were left behind after this murder. The husband, the daughter, it feeds on this. It feeds on this emotional pain. So, and then someone else comes along now. We're talking just a year later, and it's mentioned in the book that there was a similar. My mother looked very close, or very much like the woman that was murdered.
Wow.
So, I mean, could another for whatever reason, now it targets my mother. because of the similar look. It targeted me, and it may have been because of my sensitivity.
Gotcha.
So.
Wow, what a hellish start. So this was all in your home and seemed to really cause this upheaval. Why do you believe that it would appear to your mother as a spirit of a woman, to you as a darker form, and to others maybe as something else? Do you believe then it wasn't really a woman, it was a dark form taking that visage in order to, connect with your mother and try to get closer to her?
Well, in my experience.
Right. And that's all I'm asking is just your I know you're not end all be all answer for that. And I'm not trying to put you on the spot with it, but what your thoughts were. Yeah.
Thank you. The being will take whatever form is necessary to create a relationship. That's the nature of the being. So, in this case, it pulls on the heartstrings of my mother, and it uses the needy spirit, trick. So my mother feels strongly for this woman who she feels is coming to her. My father is seeing creatures, which is creating fear. So it feeds on this. In my case, I'm seeing, not only the shadows, but I'm seeing, these little creatures of a smaller stature. I'm seeing smaller hybrids, human animal type forms. Again, I see children, with me, I think it was a mixture of trying to frighten me and feed on the fear. And also, as they can do with children, trying to develop a relationship as well, a buddy, a friend. So this one being can be all these things, in my experience, that I've learned through the years, and this being I'm speaking of, I believe to be, the hooded shadow or the shadows. I believe them to be, the shapeshifter,
Now you live with this for a while. Did it get dangerous for you and your family being in this home? And how long were you in this home with this spirit or many spirits?
Well, the home where this originally occurred, once there was the loss of the child, and my mother's was very depressed. There also was which I didn't speak about, but then the relationship fell apart. And there was a separation between my mother and my father. And this is very common. When this type of activity is taking place, destroying other relationships. When we moved, it continued. It continued. The activity continued.
Why? Because you were a good food source. You and your family were energetically keyed into what they were, do you think? And I don't mean that again dismissively, but do you think that's why it stuck with you?
It's relationships, Dave. This is what all this is. I mean, with these beings, it's all about relationships. It's relationships that, sure, feeding or sustenance, sure. Having a human host. I mentioned in the book, these beings need humans they need to use their eyes. They see our world through our eyes, just like we can see their world, as strange as this may sound, through their eyes. And this, I can't answer for the being, but I would say it just comes down to, a relationship. That's why it is common for them to follow, because the attachment is because it's a relationship, and some of them don't like to let go, just like in, human relationships. Some people do not like to let go, so I wish they would have.
You don't believe that the spirit stayed in the home, though? You believe that it definitely, or at least a part of the spirits stayed with you?
There's a connection there. I think these beings come in and out of people's lives. I think those that experience them in their childhood may go many years before they're aware of their presence again. Some people, it may continue. It may always, let you know that it's there or want your attention. So I really think, it's in our family, it kind of, again, and I don't know for sure, no one can know for sure if it's, if it's one particular being or many, but it would move around to different family members because everybody would, would have some sort of story to tell, where it appears, and again, can't say for sure, but it appears that, this presence was interacting with them, whether that be in a positive or a negative way.
Gotcha. And yourself, did this spirit ever become physical in a sense of it touched or connected with you?
Dave, I've been pushed. I have been choked. I have been bitten. I have been burned. I have been, grabbed in a way that I could never really have have someone understand or even believe, and I mean, I say grabbed, I mean with such tremendous force. In other words, being pulled down or being, tremendous force, holding me up against a wall. This may sound strange, but it came with the territory, it came with the territory possibly from my childhood, and it also came with the territory of following a mystical path,
Sure.
Yeah.
And would this, was this still while you were living with your family that these spirits would affect you physically and attack you like this? Or was this at different points throughout your life?
Well, I would say in the early years, it was more of just coming and going, sure, you might have an old hag syndrome or sleep paralysis type experience occasionally, nightmares occasionally, the scratching on the walls or the brightening of the lights or playing with the electricity in some, way or another. It's usually the way it was through the early years. It wasn't until I really was dedicated, to the mystical path that it became more intense, and that, is the reason for the book. It got to a point of I couldn't believe even what I was experiencing. I was searching for answers of why. And, I searched far far and wide, to get answers, because some of the stuff was just too bizarre,
And how old were you when this began, did you say?
Probably late 20s.
Okay.
Is when it began, and then I'd say around 32, 33 is when it really started to go to another level.
So it was during this time. I mean, are you researching and trying to understand it? Are you trying to ignore it and not give it power?
Well, I was battling, the presence as a Christian. I was doing everything I can, from praying to, asking for assistance, of Jesus, God, the angels, etc. You try it all, and it wasn't helping, but I never lost faith. I just, continued to battle, these things, I couldn't find the answers for. So, as a Christian, I started to search, elsewhere. I started to search other religions. I started to, read as much as I could, to understand, well, I mean, probably I would say, like most would think, why me? And it was just one of those things, I just had to go through it, for whatever reason. If it was my...
Well, as somebody who's religious, were you ever resentful towards God that you seem to be singled out when other people weren't? Other people that maybe weren't as religious or Christian had normal lives, and here you are trying to abide by a specific theology, and yet you're victimized?
I think what occurs, Dave, it has a lot to do with emotion. So if you have intense love for God, if you have intense love for Jesus, and again, I'm not just saying here, just intense love, whatever you believe in, it's, the being feeds on this, it feeds on that emotion. Now, this is where some people go. This is the reason why the book is Deceptive Gods, Confronting the Divine and the Demonic. So some people would think right away, no, only the darkness feeds. Well, in my case, and in my experience, I find that it feeds on both. It feeds on, your love, as well as, your fear, your hate, etc. So it feeds on both. This is my experience. I respect others' experiences. This is what I found, with this particular presence that I was battling. I believed this presence to be, when it was feeling like this, this intense love, this joy, this blissful feeling that would come over you, this cloud that would, this feeling transforms you, and it has transformed many, but I would also get this cloud, this presence, this dreadful presence, this, doom and gloom, this, this angry presence. As a Christian, at this time period, battling myself because I was feeling that this powerful presence that I believed to be God, and this presence at time that felt like this, like a loving angel. And also I've got this presence of this darkness, and it's like I'm going back and forth, questioning myself. I can't. I'm feeling both being. I'm feeling a similarity in their energy. I'm very sensitive to energy. I'm very sensitive to emotion. So, I for a while I didn't believe. I had to be wrong. I had to be wrong.
Right.
This went on for a while. These beautiful, life-changing, mystical, religious experiences that, bring tears to your eyes and joy to your heart. Yet, I'm getting tossed around and bitten and burned, and we read about this, and we, as Christians, and we feel that this is a test, that we need to go through this. Well, maybe that's true, but when I started to feel more of this similarity, and then I started to interact where it got, where there was dialogue, and I paid close attention to that dialogue, and I wrote down this dialogue, which is what probably I'm not saying this in a negative way, I don't think was done much, many years ago. If you pay attention to the dialogue, if you write it down and you analyze it and look for the similarities, and really study how it speaks. When I started to do this, it helped for me. And again, I say for myself, I'm not saying, in my experience, that this particular presence that I believe to be both, divine, as well as demonic, it was one and the same being. It was a being capable of both.
Well, let's do this. We have to take a quick break. The book, sure. Deceptive Gods, Confronting the Divine and Demonic. We have a link for that book on today's program guide, so you can find it and rate, review, read it, get a copy for yourself. We'll come back, talk more about our guest's experiences with the strange and the supernatural, and what are his thoughts? Are ghosts truly deceased humans? And what about his encounters with a succubus? We'll find out that and more when we return to the best in paranormal talk radio. This is Darkness Radio. We're back. This is Dave and Tim. You're listening to Darkness Radio. Our topic tonight, Deceptive Gods, Confronting the Divine and the Demonic. Lorne Therrien, our guest, as we discuss his real-life experiences with these dark and light forces. It's interesting that you just said that you would feel these beings and that there were dark beings, light beings, but you believe that they were one and the same. Is that meaning that it was one being that would vacillate between the light and the dark, or that for all of the good beings that were around you, there were an equal or greater amount of darker beings?
Well, what I've found, I've changed, obviously, after many years of confrontations. If you only have one or two encounters, it's easy to believe if you have an angelic encounter, if you have a couple of them, or even one of them, it's easy to believe because it feels so loving, and the way it makes you feel is so comforting. It's easy to believe that's what it is. And I'm not saying it isn't, but, on the other side of the coin, you have this experience with this dark presence. You're in your home, you feel this, this evil presence. Now, as a Christian, we're led to believe it's got to be two separate beings. It can't be, one being both light and dark. But if we look at ourselves as humans, are we capable of being both light and dark? Well, of course we are.
Certainly, yeah.
So, this is how, with my experience, through the years, I have not had, a couple of encounters. I've had hundreds and hundreds of encounters. So I've had time, to study the being as the being was studying me. Again, it sounds strange, but it's just the way it is, for whatever reason. So, the being reacts like we react. So let's say, we're praying, we're speaking from the heart, we're compassionate. The being will come to you, and it will come to you, as goodness. It will come to you, as an angel. It'll come to you as a divine being. It may come to you as an alien, of light, let's say. And on the other side of the coin, if you're feeling, you're angry, or, you're mad at the world for whatever reason, the being can come to you, in a dark form, as maybe just a presence that feels evil, or just a presence that feels angry, or a presence that feels like extreme, like hatred, So if you've only had one or two of these encounters, it's easy to believe that the dark presence is always dark, or the light, presence of light, or the divine is always divine, or one is unholy and the other is holy, because you've only had one or two experiences. But if you've had hundreds of experiences, then you get to know the feelings as well as the presence. And this is when I started to see and feel the shift in the emotions of the being more and more. I could tell when it was divine, depending, not only just the dialogue, because dialogue definitely helped. Having dialogue with the beings definitely helped. Because this way here, I could talk, pay attention to what it was saying, and then try to test it. Say
Wait a
things.
minute. At what point do you go from being a victim to deciding that you're going to start to speak to these creatures, these beings, and see if you can elicit some kind of response?
Well, the point, I'll be honest, Dave, before I could get to that point, I had to go down, and I had to go down big time. I had to, some people might say, call the dark night of the soul, let's say. I had to hit rock bottom. And when I say rock bottom, I mean, I started to have more, the stress was really taking its toll on me. Anxiety issues started, which, definitely comes with the territory. Anxiety turned to a phobia. from a phobia turned to agoraphobia, and the next thing you know, I couldn't even leave the house. I had developed a phobia of even leaving the house. So I had hit, my quality of life went out the window, at that point. And then, I prayed more, I meditated, I spent time in nature slowly when I could get out. But believe me, it took a while to get to that point. I had to take baby steps. I literally had to, jog around the garden in the backyard, before I finally could jog around the block, and then finally, start jogging 1 to 2, and started building 1 mile, 2 mile, 3 miles, etc. So it was, I had to go through a lot. So this didn't just come, I'm like some superhero. I'm no superhero. I have no superpowers other than the power to choose, just like everybody else. So from there, I built, I worked on myself. I finally got to the point of meditation, that I achieved what some people would,
Well, when you were talking to these beings, what would they tell you, Lorne?
What was that? What were they telling me?
What were they telling you? Were they speaking out loud in an audible voice, or was it like in your head telepathically?
Well, what happens is if you start, it can start out where you're just hearing a voice. We're told we can hear the voice. You can hear the voice of God, or we could hear the voice of demons. So, this is what we assume it to be. So you would hear, short, maybe a few words, maybe a short sentence.
Were they always threatened?
No. I mean, the loving side would speak beautifully. The dark side would speak with, vulgarity. It would threaten, it would speak, dark. You could definitely, see in the dialogue. I mean, as you see in the book, that's why the book is intentionally, split between divine and demonic. And I do that for a reason. I do that to help balance the book, because, it's too often that books are created about the demonic. And, you can pick up the book and you can feel a darkness. You can feel a change in you. You can feel a shift. Maybe you get some pressure in your solar plexus. You don't feel right, because it's the darkness. It's a dark vibration. So in this book, I try to balance out the divine part of the being with the darker part of the being. So that way they're the help for the book for me to feel balanced, So going back to what you were saying as far as how do they speak? So I had to find a way, what occurred during hypnosis. I was going to classes to become a hypnotist. And this is around 2000, the year 2000. And, we each had to go up and be hypnotized. I was never hypnotized before. So it was my turn. I went up, and our hypnosis teacher, hypnotized me. And what occurred is what we would call channeling, which I wasn't expecting. And what came through was a very powerful, as they say, divine-like being. that said that when it was asked if it was from the light, it says, no, I am the light. And I guess by what they tell me is it changed the energy of the room of a full class. It's very powerful.
It makes you wonder, is it changing the energy of the room because there is truly a spirit there? Or is it changing the energy of the room because suddenly what was expected is unexpected and everybody's just kind of freaked out? You know what I mean? There's a definite difference between, well, that's creepy because I can hear a story and have my hackles go up. It doesn't mean a demon is standing behind me breathing on my neck.
Yeah.
It's just the reaction of hearing or experiencing something bizarre. Do you believe that the being was there among you, or was it the effect on them simply by hearing this come forth from you?
Well, these beings, in my experience, they're electrical. They're energy. We're electrical. And if you keep this in mind, you'll understand how they're able to affect electricity. If they can affect electricity of your appliances, they can affect the electricity of the human body, if you understand this. And this is how I believe it is done. It is done through electricity, So it can create a feeling, like it created a feeling in me, from when it's external to a feeling that like most of us, that have had these mystical religious experiences with such an intensity that there's no words to describe it. You have to experience it. This is the way it's always been with these mystical religious experiences. Your heart aches, this tremendous ache, but the ache is joy. This is what they're capable of doing. And, through the years, I realized, having more than one of these particular experiences, that it's electrical. It's something is occurring electrically. So in that room, again,
but Lorne, we are an electrical source, right? I mean, there's no doubt about it. Scientifically measured, we have electrical storms in our brain. The heart runs on an electrical impulse. Yep. Is this energy? Is this are these beings? Do you think true manifestations of something outside of us, meaning not coming from us, not a manifestation of our fears and anxieties, but something entirely separate and a life force of its own?
Well, prior to this particular investigation that's in the book, I was like many people. I had experiences with this presence that would, it would appear as a shadow. Shadows is what throughout my life, I've probably seen the most. I could never count how many, different shadow encounters of different forms. Prior to that time, I've had visions of what this being's supposed to be. In other words, third eye experiences where you see a vision that is influenced by them, let's say. I've had dreams where I know they were influenced. I see symbols that are influenced. But I had never had the being manifest in front of me prior to this investigation, to where I got a reality check of what we're dealing with. So at this point, I can tell you they are a being outside of us. I believe them to be a being that exists outside this dimension. So I would say they would be, I would call them dual dimensional beings. And they can obviously influence us. And how I would say that is, if you were to piggyback two cell phones today, let's say, and you piggyback the two cell phones, you can exchange data. Okay? I believe this is how it works with the beings. They merge with us. They merge their, we'll say their electrical energy with ours. And they can influence you. Many people may not agree with that, but they can influence you by making you see illusions, making you hallucinate. And again, as I'd already mentioned, visions, influence your dreams, develop a relationship with you through any one of these methods, or all the above, So the answer is yes. They are, in my experience, an external being that exists, I believe, in another dimension. I think this is what we are confronted with today. It's not to be concerned about beings from another planet, but first be concerned about these beings from another dimension. I'm certainly not saying there aren't beings on another planet, but I think we first need to study, these beings that have been influencing humanity for, as long as we've been around.
So do you think then these entities are the dead? Mrs. Miller got murdered in the house, therefore the female spirit that your mother encountered was Mrs. Miller? Or is it otherworldly beings taking on these shells of recognizable things to different people to elicit fear from the children, to elicit control over the husband, to elicit sympathy from the wife? What do you believe is really going on?
When it comes to the, what we believe to be the dead, in my experience, I don't believe anyone can interact with the dead. I have have dialogue with hundreds and hundreds of personalities that have claimed to be, men, women, and children that were deceased. And by keeping the dialogue, paying attention to the dialogue, analyzing the dialogue, analyzing the emotions of the presence, testing, a lot of testing. I believe it's these beings playing all the roles of the deceased. I believe it is these beings that are creating your ghosts, and I'm not one that hasn't experienced, ghostly figures. I've seen my share. But there was always a presence noticed when I did see this, these ghosts. And the presence through the years became more and more familiar. And I believe this presence is these, it's these beings, think about it. We've been chasing ghosts for a long time. And, we can go to a location where, let's say, a ghost, was experienced and you can't find anything, I've gone to locations where, ghosts were seen, by others, couldn't find it. And, in my mother's case, when we go back to that house, I believe it was the shadow that created that ghost. It's the same presence that's playing all the roles. We have to keep that in mind. Throughout history, no one has ever been able to have the being manifest before them. It doesn't matter what religion you believe in, and I'm certainly not knocking any. I respect them all. It's just that it all has to do with interacting and talking and having a relationship with something we can't see. To me, after 50 years, it is these beings. It is this dual dimensional being. And in the book, whether I was lucky enough or unlucky enough, the presence did manifest. Not something that I expected in the investigation, nor do I expect many people to believe me, but it did manifest, I won't go into too much, about that, but it does manifest, and you do see what appeared before me. If this is what it is, and if it does really truly look like this, it makes sense. It really makes sense. Microbial life that invades our bodies. We have 3 pounds of microbial life in our bodies. So, you can go through life, and I'd hate for one of these beings to invade my body. But we're constantly invaded. You can pray until the cows come home, but beings, and I'm not being disrespectful when I say that. I'm just speaking from my viewpoint. These beings will still invade your body. Look at COVID-19, So we're not just dealing with microbial life that can invade our bodies. We are dealing with another form of life, and always have been, that has taken all the forms, that, needs the human body to have the human experience. Again, this is based on my experience.
Now that you've had all these experiences, do you believe that it has made you stronger because of this? Or do you believe that you also suffer a form of PTSD because you were the focus of so much of this?
Well, there was a point where I would have to say, it took its toll, let's say. Because the intensity was, if you read the book, that's only a very small part. There's other books to follow of what I experienced, again, for whatever reason. As I say in the book, because Tom, who was my student, in the book, when he asked, why are you going through this? Why, do you ever wonder why? And I think back and I go, I wanted to know God, with all my heart. I wanted to have, like most mystics do, I wanted to have a personal relationship with God. And I loved God with all my heart. So I kind of got what I asked for, and I say that from this presence standpoint, because it was this presence that was playing God. And I'm not saying this is what occurs with everybody. Please understand that. I'm only speaking of my own personal experience, because this, you see in the book where it speaks as God. You see in the book where it speaks as angels. You see in the book where it speaks as Jesus, and it speaks as demons, and it speaks as an alien, and it speaks as humans. This is, unaltered dialogue. So what occurred after the awakening, let's say? An awakening meaning to awaken to your true nature, to the stillness of your being. If it wasn't for this, if it wasn't for me awakening to what is God, truthfully, there may have been another ending to the story. That's what gave me strength.
If there are people listening right now, Lorne, that are under attack and believing that they are the focal point for negativity, what should they do? What should be the first order of business for them?
Well, the first order of business, I would say, is number one, understand this being is an expression of God. It has a purpose. It plays a part. Look at it, in other words, if you're walking through nature and you've got a pesky horsefly, or if you're in nature and, you got to be careful of a deer tick. You know what I mean? Nature is beautiful. I spend a lot of time in nature. Nature is comforting. Nature, vibrates to this, the stillness, that is God. To me, again, people might think differently, but to me, this is God. This is this stillness, this peace. But again, even in that peace, even in that beauty of nature, you have that danger, of deer ticks. Again, of a pesky horsefly, or, you got to worry about spiders, So with the being, what I would say to most is that what I try to do with most, because I certainly can't go to, many of the people that I know or that come to me that are under attack. What I first try to do is help them to view the being differently. Don't hate the being. If you hate the being, you're giving it strength. Just like don't fear the being. How you approach this being, think about how you would approach another person. As far as, let's say, you're in a relationship. If you constantly in a relationship threaten this person, if you scream at this person, if you degrade this person, if you want to challenge this person, are you going to bring out the brighter part of that particular person, the brightest part of that being? No, you're not. It's the same thing with these beings. And this is if you look at it from how I view them, as being both divine and demonic, angelic and demonic. So if you're facing this being, you're under attack, be careful what you say. Don't threaten, don't challenge, don't hate, control your emotions. If you can remain still, if you can remain calm, the being will also calm. If you're expressing fear, if you're emitting fear, you're going to feed the darkness of that being. That's what you're going to know, is the darkness of that being. You'll create that storm, or you'll feed the storm if it's already there. If you want a sunny day, then you need to make some changes. That's all. This is just part of life. This is the way I view it. It's just part of life. I live my everyday. It's a way of life. There's preventive measures that we have to take. We know now, for microbial life, there are preventive measures you have to take with this particular hidden form of life. This, these dual dimensional beings. And again, you can call them what you may.
Can we lock down? I mean, I'm out on the Holzer files investigating cases of strange phenomena that is in some cases spanned over 100 years and is still going strong. Some where cases have settled down and only reignited in the last 5-6 years. I'm finding different aspects of the paranormal every time we go out, from poking a hornet's nest to just the, I guess what's the word I'm looking for, from poking a hornet's nest that can be very active to passive spirits that seem just as interested in our fascination with them as we are. So there's different aspects to this all along. Do you have concerns for people that are interested in the paranormal and out there actively pursuing those passions and interests?
Well, one of the original reasons for the book was I was seeing a lot of children, using a Ouija board. I was seeing a lot of parents with, performing divination practices in front of the children. We have to be very careful. These beings want a relationship. And they want a relationship for many reasons. I go into it pretty deep in the book. So if you were to pursue this, you just have to make sure that you're taking the preventive measures in your life, so you don't, bring it home to others, because the beings will, attach, and they will follow. Whatever their reasons are, there can be many. And, they will follow, come to your family. They will analyze your family. They will look for the weakest link.
But you talk about being shored up and being kind of protected. You were religious. Other people they're religious, and yet they become vulnerable. They are attacked. They're put in the crosshairs of these dark forces. Is that nothing more than just to challenge their faith, which seems pretty shitty to me, Lorne, that in order to challenge us, instead of just rewarding this faith for having it, a blind faith at that, let's face it, we're challenged and in some cases broken and brought to our knees. Some are brought to death because of that challenge.
Yeah. Well, it is not a challenge that's occurring here with these beings. It never was. We have created this separation in the being that doesn't exist. We have created a separation of angel, demon. We have created a separation of loving God, Satan. We've split the being in half. So this isn't a challenge. It isn't a test. It feeds off both sides. It feeds off playing the divine role. It feeds off playing the dark role. So, yes, I was religious, and I have grown, in many ways. I had to, because if I'd have maintained that same belief with what I was going through, again, the outcome wouldn't have been probably that good, with the intensity that I was going through. At this point, if you view the being as being both, and you're experiencing, you're having some activity in a home, or you're being attacked, then present the being, bring out its goodness. Speak, say, I know you have a good side. Say, I know you can be loving. And when you speak, your intention is very important. So the intention has to be real. The being will know if you're fake.
Right, not just going through the motions, like it says in the Bible. Right? Don't, be passionate. It'd be better to be passionate than to be dispassionate. Because what is it? And I can't remember the Bible quote, but something like he'd rather spat you out when you pretend to be walking the walk and talking the talk, because it's displeasing. So believe in what you're saying, but sometimes we have to fake it till we make it, don't we? I mean, there have been times where I feel like I have to believe and listen. My faith is challenged constantly, by life, and but I feel like, you know what, I'm going to stand up, and then people will come to us, but Dave, we need your prayers and healing. We need this, and we'll post them and put it out there, and sometimes I'm curious if anybody's at home listening, in heaven or God or the universe or whatever is, this intention is being put forth, but then something remarkable happens, or we get a response one way or another, not always what we hoped. As the Rolling Stones say, I don't always get what I want, but sometimes I get what I need.
Yeah. Well, this is just, in my experience, this is the way I have learned. You stop when you realize that there is no war. There never was. When you really stop to realize that there is no two beings battling each other. No more than this. Let's say you have a family member that speaks, loving words to you one moment and then is talking behind your back. Is that two separate beings? Is it an angel and a demon? No, it's not. If humanity looks at themselves, they'll understand the being. And this approach, and I'm only speaking for myself and those, that I have shared, these experiences with, that this is what worked for me. It's now there's no reason to fear the being, because you can change the being, by, maintaining, a calm state. This is very important to controlling your emotions. The being has nothing to go on. The last thing the being wants you to be is still, because it can't get, your love. It can't get your hate or fear. When you vibrate to that, it may sound strange, but believe me, you go out in nature and just sit and just try to match that feeling of nature. If you can learn to maintain that, there's no emotion there. It's just stillness. Stillness is God. If you can learn to maintain this, the being can't feed off the love, or the goodness. It can't feed off the love of the hate. It has nothing, and the being will back off. If it can't feed, it'll back off. If you believe that you've just changed it, if you believe you just took in this demonic being and it's gone and here comes an angel, in my experiences, that's not what's occurring. The being, of course, it plays darkness, it leaves, you get this light, this brightness that appears, and you feel that, this, an angel's here, or, the deity's here, etc. That's not what is taking place in my experience. It's just the being, shifting. It shifts. Originally, for years, when I was testing the being, through, I had to find a way of interacting with the being to get longer dialogue. Because short dialogue, you can never know who the being is with short dialogue. A couple of words, they can play anything. You'll never know. They can fake it all. Longer dialogue, you stand a better chance because you can analyze the dialogue. And then if you do this for days, weeks, months, years, you start to know the dialogue, So this is how, originally I had to find, like I said, a method. The method I chose, and you'll see in the book, is I used a pendulum. I didn't want to use a Ouija board. I used a pendulum. I created a chart, and this is how I chose to interact. Now, some people won't agree with it, but again, I had to find a way of maintaining a longer conversation in a way that I was comfortable with. Those that seen me channel wanted me to channel. I didn't want nothing to do with channeling. I was all set with any being, entering my body. Didn't want nothing to do with that. I wasn't ready to be, I respect those that do it, but for me, no thanks. So I had to find a way, and that was the way that I chose for the Deceptive Gods and that particular investigation. And able to.
So just for our skeptical audience that's listening.
Oh, sure.
Think like Ouija boards, dowsing rods, pendulums. There's the ideomotor effect, the involuntary motion of your body because of your expected responses. And as you said, you're going in with intention, which means you kind of have a belief of one thing or another anyway. How do you differentiate between you're answering your own questions and the gods are taking time to tap a pendulum back and forth for you to give you the answers?
Mm-hmm.
Do you think they were screwed with you because they thought, "Oh, how arrogant are you that you?" And I'm not besmirching you. I hope you understand that. I'm just, putting your mindset in the gods of the Hollywood movies we've watched. If you're challenging them and wanting them to play this game with you, how do you know that it's the gods you're getting and not a prankster spirit like Dave Schrader who died and is bored now and he's tapping the thing just to freak you out? How do you differentiate between that and know what you're really getting?
Well, you don't do something like this and don't expect skepticism. I certainly expect it, and I respect it, and you should. So in the case of using a pendulum, in the book you'll see I use automatic writing where there's no pendulum, okay? In automatic writing, your mind is blank. You have no thoughts. You just write, okay? In the case of the pendulum, it was the same way. Your mind is blank. If I had thought at all, if any words come into my head, I would definitely question that it's me. Okay, and people will, of course, they're going to question. Of course, we have books that were written thousands of years ago. People believe what they were told. They don't question how they got this information. It just happens to be some sort of magic or just for those chosen few. But, those that have the experience see things a little different. So some form of divination was used. It had to be, And again, as the being develops a relationship and the relationship gets stronger, well, now there was no longer a need for divination type tools. Now it will be coming to you as just as clear as me and you talking. You know what I mean? And the same thing, the visions get stronger. And the visions can be, again, they can be both. They can be both heavenly and what people would consider hell. They can see creatures like, an H.P. Lovecraft, or you could see some just beautiful, mythical creatures. This is what occurs. I don't doubt, people, hear that and they right away you can be skeptical. I don't blame you. I don't blame you at all. I questioned myself. So what I would say is we got to understand something. When I said what takes place, I believe, based on a lot of experience, is a merging of consciousness, just like two piggyback phones exchanging data. And I believe in time science, I'm sure, will discover this. That this is how it's been done all these years. We believe we need, at this point, we want to see wires. If we got to see a wire, for this exchange of electricity. But there's no wires. No wires necessary, we got to think of, Nikola Tesla. You know what I mean? Think of what he had said, his inventions, wireless electricity. You got to think about this. And I believe, based on experience, is how it's done. It's a conscious entity exchanging information with another conscious entity with a physical form. This is how it's done. Again, I respect, skepticism. But, I don't go through the book believing I have any special powers. I'm questioning myself constantly,
Do you question sanity as well?
My sanity? Well, I think anyone that goes throughout time should have, they question the sanity, I'm sure if you were to ask any of the people who went through, had mystical experiences, Christian mystics, and you read about them, you can't read their stories and not question their sanity. Unless you experience it, it's hard to believe. 30 years ago, if you'd have mentioned I would be saying, yeah, sure.
Well, that's why I ask, because sometimes we do this, and after a while, you just start to become accepting of it. To the outside world, we may look nuts for our thoughts and belief systems and concepts of what we do and how we make this communication. But I just wonder, do you ever? Because trust me, there are days Tim and I question our sanity.
Of course,
24 hours. But when you were reaching and you're communicating with a pendulum, were you getting responses that were surprising to you, or were you getting responses that you kind of always believed all along?
If you see the dialogue in the book, if you see the difference between when they're speaking beautifully and when they're speaking dark, they speak in a way that, if you read it, you'll see humans don't talk like this. They don't, this isn't and I'm certainly not insulting, this isn't a medium picking up a few words. This is long dialogue. And they're powerful words, whether it's speaking dark or whether it's speaking divine. They're very powerful words. Now read the chapter of 11 Gems. It's very powerful. Where, these beings that are, playing an angelic role, give laws like you would say the commandments. I don't know if this is what occurred thousands of years ago, and I'm certainly not saying it is. I can only share with you what I experienced and understand, in 2011, when all these investigations were completed, I have never done any of this stuff since. I only share my experiences. And I would prefer to tell, people, or at least suggest to them to stay on a spiritual path that involves avoiding any interaction with the beings. But I know, even if I was to say, and if I say you shouldn't do it or don't do it, you're going to do it. So this is the reason for the book. It wasn't to make myself look special. I mean, the beings you'll see in the book, they give me all kinds of labels. If I was naive or gullible, I would think I've got all kinds of powers. You'll see how they try to win me over, with flattery, etc. This is the nature of the being. So, the book's not written for, I'm not out to create a new religion or anything of that sort. These are just my experiences, and if this helps, people, or helps to, answer some questions, then I'm happy, but, I will, like you, there are days when you'll definitely question yourself, but since 2011, because I don't,
right,
interact intentionally with the beings anymore, I'm not saying that there is an unintentional interaction. Of course there's going to be, do you get phone scammed every day? Do you get, how many scam calls do you get?
Before we leave, talk to me about the succubus experience. Was this something that happened quite often, or was this a one-off time?
Oh no. You see in the book, we know throughout history, and we know even in scripture, depending on how you interpret it, that these unseen forces have taken a liking to humans. They want to have relations with humans. And as I said before, it's relationships with humans. The succubus experience, we believe, again, we have, for some, they believe there's gods and goddesses. I respect that belief. We believe that there's, succubi, incubi. Again, you're splitting the being. You're splitting the being in two, rather than think that, and this is my view based on experience, that the being can be both male and female. This is what's missing a lot. The feminine aspect of the being. You see the masculine role, but the feminine's been left out. Been left out with angels, been left out with God. But in my experience, these
beings, though, did they sexually molest you?
Well, it begins with touching, and many that I've talked to have come to me with these type of problems. It's touching of the hair, caressing of the face, caressing, of various parts of the body. Then it gets more physical. Now, in my case, did I have sexual intercourse? No. There's some people that claim to do, and that's great. I never let it get to any type of, level like that. And this, again, it's a freaky thing to, even to talk about. It's something that you certainly don't tell your urologist. You know what I mean, Dave? So it's more of a touching. It's more of, pinching, biting. It's appearing in, the forms are explained in the book. It's the conversations. It's the appearing in dreams.
Do you get addicted to that as well, just humanly? The attention, the affection, whatever you want to refer to it as?
No, Dave, I don't. I'm not one. I'm a martial artist. I went through.
Well, I only ask because there are people that don't like that type of thing at first, and then, but there's something about it, and then that kind of is what breaks them down, and then they allow. Well,
it depends on your, it depends on where you are in your life. This occurred, and I can tell you straight why it occurs. Because just as the being occurs to you, appears to you as divine, it appears to you as demonic. It'll appear to you as male and female. If you're a female, it'll appear as male. If you're male, it'll appear as female. It's just part of creating a relationship. If you want to take it to the point of, intercourse of something of that nature, I don't know. I didn't take it to that level. I just knew and could tell from, because it wasn't just one situation, that it was the same being. It's just the same being. The being can be male, female, divine, demonic. It is the nature of the being. That's why they've been having a field day with humanity for thousands of years. And again, I expect skepticism. I'm just saying, based on my experience, this is just the being doing whatever it takes necessary to deepen the relationship. Just like it'll try to, in a divine manner, it'll appear as very loving. And if you're a person that needs love in your life, then you will fall for the being because it's given you love. If you're angry at the world, then it will be at your side, to whisper some more darkness and negativity into your ears. If you're a woman that's lonely for a man, it'll appear as a man. If you're a woman that has lost her husband, it'll appear as him, and the same thing goes for a man. So this is just the nature of the being, in my experience.
Understandable. Deceptive Gods, Confronting the Divine and Demonic, Lorne Therrien Sr. Lorne, thank you for this interesting insight into what has occurred in your life and sharing your story. I'm sure there are going to be listeners and readers of your book that are going to find some comfort and solace in your words as well. So thank you for being open about that.
Thank you. It was a pleasure, Dave.
It was a pleasure speaking with you. Stay safe, folks. Be aware of these things in your life and what you give them power over. I think that's an important lesson that we can all take away from today's program as well. For Tim Dennis, I'm Dave Schrader. You've been listening to the best in paranormal talk radio. This is Darkness Radio.